On June 1st, 2011, the Waller family's life took a turn. A woman named Jackie contacted her sister Cheryl, informing her that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay. Jackie planned to return home later that day. However, she never came back, nor did she make any further contact. Worried and unable to reach Jackie, Cheryl became increasingly anxious. By around 7 p.m., Cheryl decided to drive to the police station. Here, she made a startling statement. Cheryl claimed that Clay Waller had killed her sister. The police officers found this accusation shocking, since Jackie had only called a few hours earlier, and there hadn't been any immediate cause for concern or reason to believe she was in danger at that time. Despite the unusual nature of Cheryl's assertion, it eventually became apparent that her instincts were correct. Jackie was indeed entangled in a troubling situation. So, what exactly happened to Jackie? And why was Cheryl so convinced her sister had been murdered by her ex-husband, even before Jackie was declared missing? Jackie was known for being sweet, kind, and caring. When she met Clay, there was an instant connection between them. Clay had a speech impediment that had subjected him to ridicule by others. This made him feel awkward and uncomfortable in social situations. However, unlike others, Jackie didn't ridicule him. Instead, she defended him and ensured he wasn't hurt by people's unkind remarks. Jackie's nature was all about protecting the vulnerable, fighting injustice, and helping everyone around her. It wasn't long before their bond grew stronger and they got married. At the time of their marriage, both were about 30 years old and aspired to have a large family. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, where Jackie began creating a family nest. She had a successful career. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said about Clay. His life consisted of numerous failures, and he struggled with holding down any job for long periods. As a result, Jackie became the primary breadwinner of the family. She always dreamed of having children, but faced challenges in conceiving naturally. Determined to become a mother, though, she underwent fertility treatments, commonly referred to as ECO. So when Jackie discovered she was pregnant, with triplets no less, her joy knew no bounds. The family included 2 girls, Abby and Addison, plus 1 boy, Maddox. It was incredibly challenging for the woman to care for 3 children at once. Nonetheless, she did not complain. She continued to shoulder all responsibilities by herself, without relying on her husband. He seemed uninterested in the children. At that time, Clay took a job with the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife cared for the children. However, he didn't stay long. He was fired after a year. Only Jackie's parents and sister provided assistance with the children, allowing her some respite. When Clay lost his job, Jackie took on work to support the entire family. Even after their children were born, Clay did not change his behavior and showed little interest in either his family or work. Occasionally, he engaged in part-time work that didn't bring in the expected income. Clay seemed comfortable living off his wife's hard work. She worked 40 hours a week and managed the household simultaneously. Jackie's career progressed rapidly. She soon secured a management position at an insurance company branch. This advancement further relaxed Clay's attitude toward financial responsibility. Instead of appreciating his wife's efforts, Clay mistreated her in various ways. He insulted her frequently, called her worthless, and demeaned her value by stating no one wanted her. His infidelities and abusive actions caused significant distress. Jackie's parents and sister were deeply troubled by Clay's behavior and urged her to divorce him. However, Jackie was reluctant to take such a drastic step at that time and tried to salvage their marriage. Every day brought diminishing hope that their relationship could be saved. Over the next few years, financial difficulties compounded their problems because Clay was not working while Jackie's salary could no longer cover all expenses for their large family. Mounting mortgage debts led to their house being foreclosed upon. The woman decided it was time to move in with sister, seizing upon the opportunity. Her husband then relocated to a friend's place. At this point, their children were a bit older. Jackie faced the tough, yet necessary choice to file for divorce. She believed she and her kids deserved a better life. When Jackie brought this up with her husband, Clay seemed calm initially. However, he soon changed his stance and refused the divorce. His threats started subtly, but gradually escalated into direct threats against her life. He warned that divorcing him would be like signing a death warrant for herself and their children. These threats terrified Jackie, yet she remained resolute. Living under such conditions was no longer an option for her, so she sought ways to end her marriage with Clay. She turned to her family, sharing the troubling behaviors of her husband, and began keeping a diary to document his actions. Jackie also noticed that Clay was stalking her. For the sake of safety, she and her children moved in with her sister during this period. Her kids were only 5 years old and didn't understand the situation fully. Nonetheless, Jackie explained that their current living arrangement was crucial. Time passed, and things began to stabilize as the divorce process neared its conclusion. It appeared that Clay had come to terms with their separation and ceased his harassment towards Jackie. They even started forming new relationships on the side. Jackie allowed Clay visitation rights with their children, and disputes between them reduced significantly. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jackie agreed to meet at the attorney's office to finalize the last aspects of their divorce. On that day, their son Maddox was visiting his father, while Jackie's other children stayed with Cheryl, Jackie's sister. After the meeting at the attorney's office, Jackie planned to pick up Maddox from Clay's house before heading back to Cheryl's place. Leaving the office, Jackie telephoned her sister Cheryl to report that everything had gone smoothly and mentioned she was on her way to collect Maddox from Clay's residence before returning home. That conversation would be their last. Jackie gradually lost touch. As time passed, her sister became increasingly anxious and started calling Jackie, but there was no answer. She then tried calling Clay, but he didn't respond either. Cheryl began to suspect that Clay had done something to Jackie. She sent him a text message. "If I don't hear from Jackie in 5 minutes, I'm going to the police." Almost immediately, Clay called back asking what was wrong. Cheryl responded firmly, stating that she believed he knew exactly what was happening. Clay asserted he didn't know where Jackie was and mentioned he would instruct her to call Cheryl when he saw her. However, Cheryl wasn't convinced. She took her sister's children to their parents' house and filed a police report personally. Despite initial skepticism about Clay's involvement in Jackie's disappearance, the detectives took her concerns seriously. They didn't make her wait for 24 hours before investigating further. Instead, they proceeded to contact Jackie's ex-husband for any leads on her whereabouts. When questioned, 41-year-old Clay informed them that he had lunch with Jackie. They subsequently went to the attorney's office to discuss some aspects of their divorce, and then drove together to his house for further discussions. He claimed that after chatting for a while, he left for the store. Upon his return, Jackie's car was gone. He assumed she had departed. Clay added that his son Maddox was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and insisted Jackie was aware of it. According to him, Jackie wasn't there for her son, but merely to talk about other matters with Clay. However, Cheryl found his statements implausible and inconsistent with what she knew. Jackie made it known that her visit to Clay's house was solely for seeing her son. She had no intention of discussing anything else with him, especially given that she wouldn't have allowed her son to be far away with another woman. Noting these discrepancies, Cheryl managed to convince the investigators that Clay's account lacked credibility and suggested he might be concealing crucial information about Jackie's disappearance. In light of this new perspective provided by Cheryl, investigators were now treating the case more urgently, as both the missing person and her car remained unaccounted for. A comprehensive search was launched for Jackie a few hours after her disappearance. Investigators her Honda Pilot on an interstate highway with a flat tire, but there were no signs of an accident. The tire appeared punctured intentionally, making the scene look staged. The car was open and empty, with a few bloodstains on the back seat, but no other clues indicating her whereabouts. These disturbing details hinted at a possible attack and kidnapping. The search effort for Jackie was concentrated in the vicinity where her car was found. Numerous volunteers, including police officers, rescue squads with dogs, and family members, participated in the search. They came from various parts of the region, responding to requests from Jackie's relatives. Despite the unbearable heat, many were willing to help locate her. Jackie's family announced a reward of $3,500 for information about her whereabouts. Despite their efforts, including extensive searches and public appeals for assistance, the search yielded no results for several days. Police began to scrutinize Clay, Jackie's ex-husband, more closely. When they visited his house to speak with him again, he recounted the same story as before, but refused access to his home and car. He promptly hired a lawyer who asserted his rights. 4 days after Jackie's disappearance, Clay left her a voicemail with a distressed tone. "Hi honey, it's Sunday. You went missing on Wednesday. Please call me if you get this message. I don't know where you are, and I miss you very much." Detectives later obtained a search warrant and returned to Clay's residence for a thorough inspection. During this inspection, they discovered blood-like stains in his vehicle. Forensic analysis revealed it was fish blood. Clay had deliberately coated the car with fish blood and recorded it on video as a test for forensic experts. In addition to examining the vehicle, investigators noted conspicuous details in Clay's house. A section of carpet had been removed from the floor, leaving an obvious mark. Tiny drops of blood were also found on the walls of the hallway leading to the basement. These findings raised further questions about Clay's involvement and intentions regarding Jackie's disappearance. Traces of furniture rearrangement were evident, signaling that something unusual was happening in the house. Forensics examined under the floorboards and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood samples from the house and the carpet were sent to the laboratory for further examination. Detectives tracked the missing woman's last known movements to 1:10 a.m. She was observed at a drugstore with her ex-husband. The pair appeared composed and normal. Approximately 2 hours later, she was seen at an ATM withdrawing money. After that, Jackie did not reappear on CCTV, although Clay was seen a few hours later with his son and new girlfriend at a toy store. Subsequently, they visited a car wash in their pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. By then, Clay had changed clothes and meticulously washed both the car and the boat. This increased suspicion around him, establishing him as the prime suspect. Investigators released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, requesting eyewitnesses who may have seen them. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River in response to this request. Detectives confirmed this information through an analysis of Clay's cell phone billing records, prompting them to focus search efforts in that area. Despite numerous searches over the large terrain, nothing surfaced directly linking to the missing woman. The forensic results soon arrived, indicating that the drops of blood found in Clay's house indeed belonged to Jackie. The police then operated under the assumption that Jackie was deceased. Detectives called Clay in for questioning and attempted to procure a confession from him regarding Jackie's murder. However, Clay denied all accusations, stating that the bloodstains were remnants of an old domestic incident in his kitchen. Without physical remains or definitive proof of death, investigators lacked grounds to arrest or charge him. Despite releasing him from custody, authorities kept Clay under close surveillance and continued their investigation. Being an ex-deputy sheriff himself, Clay knew they were monitoring him closely and engaged in deceptive maneuvers to elude detection, effectively playing cat and mouse with law enforcement officials. He'd go to deserted vacant lots to mislead the investigation, while the entire neighborhood stood by and participated in the search for the missing mother of three. Clay continued to bully and taunt them. He would drive past the search party or Jackie's family, insult them, give them the middle finger, and shout that they were wasting their time and wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more suspicions and questions. Meanwhile, the missing woman's sister Cheryl fought in court for custody of the triplets. She feared the children would go to a father who was a danger. His erratic behavior backfired on him, and Cheryl got custody. This enraged him, and he began threatening his ex-wife's sister with violence, including writing about it on social media. The woman recorded these threats and contacted police. Detectives seized the opportunity and arrested Clay nearly 5 months after Jackie's disappearance. He was charged with threats to life, which he accepted, but claimed he wrote out of anger and despair at losing custody of his beloved children. Clay insisted he didn't plan anything bad against Cheryl. He viewed himself as a victim in this situation. While investigating this incident with his sister, police found out he had other charges pending against him: stealing $50,000 from a previous employer, as well as stalking a man. Detectives pressed his former co-worker, hoping Clay would confess to killing his ex-wife and lead them to her body, but it was futile. Clayton continued to deny all charges regarding Jackie's disappearance. Instead of confessing to the crime, he started claiming confidently that he knew who was behind his ex-wife's death, a man named Harry, but detectives had already checked this lead thoroughly. Harry had an ironclad alibi that eliminated him from suspicion. All evidence pointed only to Clay, yet he kept denying it. He ended up going to prison for 5 years for threatening Cheryl. While the police locked him up in jail, they continued to investigate Jackie's disappearance. The search for the missing woman continued on Devil's Island, but never yielded any results. Eventually, about 2 years after Jackie's disappearance, the cops gathered a lot of circumstantial evidence, video camera footage, blood in his house, and more. They decided to charge Clay with his ex-wife's murder, even without her body. It was a risky and desperate move because if they lost, the prosecutor's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. After consulting with his accomplices, Clay concluded that it would be best for them to make a deal with the prosecution to reduce the sentence. To do so, the defendant offered to plead guilty to the murder and provide the location of the body. Jackie's family agreed to this deal because it was important to give her a decent burial. Clay led police officers to his ex-wife's body. It was in a secluded spot on a remote sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. At first, he couldn't remember exactly which tree he had buried her under, but then admitted that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her body. One of the policemen, who was an active gardener, explained that large quantities of fertilizer killed trees. They looked around and found 3 dead trees that were of interest to them. They excavated there, and under one of the trees, they did find Jackie's body wearing the same clothes she had last been seen in. The woman was identified from dental records as Jackie Waller. Finally, Jackie's loved ones recognized that she was definitely dead and found her body. Then they were able to commit her to the ground. The woman's funeral was held on her parents' golden wedding day. Cheryl told their children that their mom was gone, and she had been killed by their father. This event was a great shock to the children because they lost both their mother and father at once. The children developed a deep aversion to Clay and refused to communicate with him henceforth. As part of the agreement, Clay had to officially confess to the murder of his ex-wife and provide specific details. He explained that the initial thoughts of murder began to surface about a year before the tragic event, when Jackie announced their separation. Despite this, he tried to suppress those dark thoughts, as Jackie was the mother of his children. However, he couldn't bear the idea of her taking his children away. He warned Jackie that such actions would have dire consequences for her, but she didn't heed his warning, which he considered her fault. The night prior to the murder, Clay traveled to a secluded area on Devil's Island to dig a grave for Jackie. According to him, their divorce proceedings were generally progressing smoothly. On that particular day, after a visit to their lawyer, they had a conversation in which she suggested they engage in intimacy one last time. They then went back to his home, where they talked in the kitchen. While looking for a snack in the refrigerator, Clay accidentally raised his head, hitting Jackie and causing her nose to bleed. This incident angered her. She stormed out into the hallway, where she smeared blood on the walls and started yelling at him that he would never see his children again. At this point, Clay lost control and attacked her. He hit her in the face with his hand and then strangled her. Subsequently, he took Jackie's body out in a dumpster and buried it in the pre-dug grave. Afterward, he meticulously cleaned out both the car and house, took a shower, changed clothes, as if nothing happened, and then went on to meet his new girlfriend and son at a toy store. Throughout this process, Clay claimed that everything was driven by impulse and emotion. He did not originally intend to kill Jackie. This contradicted his earlier statement, claiming he had dug the grave the day before. However, if Clay did not plan to kill the woman, why would he have dug the grave beforehand? It appeared to be premeditated murder. The medical examiner found multiple skull fractures on the deceased, indicating blunt force rather than a simple beating with fists. No one believed his story. Clay, who showed no remorse for killing his ex-wife, felt jubilant at receiving only 20 years in prison for second-degree murder, with the possibility of early release. The prosecutor, however, had another strategy. Clay's testimony about digging the grave buried him further. He had dug the hole in Illinois, while the murder occurred in Missouri. These actions fell under the federal law against domestic violence across state lines, and their violation allowed an additional 35 years to be added to his sentence. Clay Waller will be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. It turned out that Clay was unaware of such a law and did not foresee the consequences of his confession. Yet, his atrocities continued. Demonstrating further callousness, he wrote a book detailing Jackie's murder to profit from the tragedy. Cheryl, Jackie's sister, along with her husband, continues to raise Jackie's children with support from their elderly parents. The children have grown up remembering their mother as an exceptional person who remains forever in their hearts. They still harbor anger toward their father and deeply miss their mom. On May 2, 2009, in Wausau, Wisconsin, USA, a terrible crime took place. An 18-year-old girl named Brianna Marie Schneller was the victim. For the small town, such an event was shocking, particularly since the girl's death was the result of actions executed with unimaginable cruelty. However, more shocking than the crime itself was the motive behind it. Brianna had a vibrant personality, loved Mexican cuisine, music, and dancing, and she was fond of roller coasters. She was very diligent and performed well academically. She was the top student at Everest High School in Washington, said Craig and Lori Schneller, her parents. She had a trip planned to Tennessee that summer. The young lady was the only one in the state of Wisconsin who had made it through the qualifying rounds of a competition held by a renowned national nonprofit organization for students in professional and technical fields, where she was to present her project. Brianna aspired to pursue higher education in restaurant management and dreamed of someday starting her own business in the food service industry. Therefore, she worked part-time at the El Mezcal restaurant in Rib Mountain to earn money and gain the necessary experience and skills. Friends, colleagues, and even patrons described her as a kind and responsive person. She was just a month away from significant milestones in her life. She was about to graduate from school and marry her beloved 22-year-old Sebastian Ramirez. Initially, her parents objected to their relationship and the age difference. In their view, their daughter had matured too quickly. However, after getting to know the young man better, they trusted him. It was evident that he genuinely loved Brianna and had serious intentions regarding their future together. The couple moved in together, renting an apartment on 12th Avenue in Wausau along with Sebastian's 19-year-old brother, Hugo. Outwardly, it seemed that the trio got along well and lived peacefully. Many envied their friendship. The brothers supported Brianna's interests, as they also worked at a restaurant called El Tequila Salsa in the same area. It is possible that one workday was when Sebastian and Brianna met each other. In any case, no one expected that a horrific tragedy could disrupt the plans and dreams of the two lovers. The morning of May 2, 2009 began as usual. Sebastian was the first to rise in the house. He didn't want to wake the girl sweetly sleeping beside him. It was a day off, and she didn't need to rush to school. While the young man was in the shower, Brianna woke up. They exchanged sweet greetings and discussed their plans for the day. Meanwhile, Sebastian tried to wake up Hugo, who had come home in the early morning and had clearly overdone it at a party the night before. After that, Sebastian left for work, which was only a 5-10-minute walk away. His younger brother followed soon after. The girl stayed home alone. She exchanged messages with her mother and then got on with her tasks. That day, Hugo felt restless. He had a headache from too much drinking and regretted overindulging. Struggling to focus, he decided to swap lunch breaks with a colleague, and at 1:20 p.m., he headed home to catch some sleep. When he entered the apartment, nothing seemed unusual at first. However, as he walked further, he noticed a disorder in his brother's and his girlfriend's room. For some reason, Brianna was lying on the floor. Hugo rushed to her and asked what happened, but she did not respond. He didn't immediately notice the blood. The young man moved the towel that had been covering her face and screamed. She was unrecognizably disfigured. He grabbed the phone to call the emergency services, but his hands were shaking and his mind was foggy. Nevertheless, he knew he had to act, and he ran to his neighbor's apartment, a floor below. Through tears, young Ramirez tried to explain what had happened and asked the woman to call for help. At 1:30 p.m., the emergency services received a call. Despite it being a Saturday, the day was far from peaceful. Unfortunately, incidents often occur on days when people are supposed to relax. The woman on the other end of the line reported that she was calling on behalf of a neighbor. He had asked her to summon emergency medical services for his brother's girlfriend. The unfortunate woman lay on the floor with cuts on her body and a disfigured face, showing no signs of life. Police and paramedics were dispatched to the address immediately. The parking lot of the apartment building was crowded, but one individual stood out from the crowd and approached them. It was Hugo Ramirez. He led the officers to the apartment. The young man could barely speak, so he simply pointed out the shocking scene. At the center of it all lay Brianna, her body bearing deep wounds. Stab wounds were evident on her chest, neck, and wrist. The officers asked the young man to leave the room while forensic specialists began their examination. One speculated that the victim had been lying there for some time, as the blood scattered everywhere had already started to dry. It was clear she had fought back, as evidenced by the defensive cuts on her arms. However, the assailant had overpowered her. The crime scene was rife with evidence. The first thing the forensic team noticed was a bloody iron lying on the floor, broken with some pieces scattered nearby. It appeared that the criminal had used it to strike her face. 2 knives lay in the bathroom sink, one missing its sharp tip. Blood was found on the soap, leading investigators to speculate that the criminal had used it to wash their hands. But the bloodied shoe print left on the carpet drew more attention. Overall, the examination of the dwelling revealed several curious details. There appeared to be no signs of forced entry, suggesting that the victim knew the wrongdoer or that he had some way of gaining entry to the apartment. Another notable detail was the scattered bills ranging from $1 to $20, amounting to a substantial sum. Hugo explained that these were tips they had accumulated at work, so much so that they were just placed anywhere. At first glance, nothing seemed to be missing from the apartment. Everything pointed to the fact that Brianna was the target of the attack, not robbery. This was confirmed by the broken knife tip found in her body. What kind of force was necessary to break a knife? Who could harbor such feelings towards a young woman? And most importantly, what could have been the cause of such unprecedented cruelty and aggression? Eager to shed light on the matter, law enforcement officers were keen to speak with the girl's relatives and close friends, especially as they needed to convey the dreadful news. In the police department's office, Craig and Lori Schneller awaited news. They had heard that something terrible had occurred at the home where their daughter lived, but unfortunately, they had been unable to contact her. With heavy hearts, they went to the police station seeking answers. The officers had to confirm the parents' worst fears were indeed true. There was no greater sorrow for parents than to endure the loss of a child. The devastating news split the Schneller's life into before and after. Authorities provided photographs of Brianna for identification. The process was a mere formality, as her identity was already established, but protocol required it. Due to the horrific injuries, not all photographs taken at the scene were shown to the family. Only those that showed part of her face were displayed. Once confirmed, the Schnellers could hardly believe what had happened. After consulting with a psychologist, Craig and Laurie were able to answer a series of questions. They were eager to assist the investigation and catch the person responsible, so they provided as much information about their daughter's life as possible. The parents insisted that she had no known enemies or ill-wishers, at least to their knowledge. It was also revealed that Brianna's mother was the last person she had communicated with. That morning, Laurie had taken Brianna's car to the auto repair shop and had messaged her daughter around 10 a.m. to inform her. Brianna had responded. This means that the tragic incident occurred after she spoke with her mother and before Hugo's arrival, establishing a timeline for the events. The police launched a comprehensive investigation. The first to be invited for an interview by the detectives were the Rodriguez brothers, Sebastian and Hugo, who were questioned separately. The fiancé of the victim, Sebastian, reported that he woke up at 9:15 in the morning, had a brief conversation with Brianna while getting ready for work, and then woke his brother. By 10:15, he was already at the restaurant. He learned about the incident after receiving a phone call. Hugo's account matched, stating he left the house about 15 minutes after Sebastian. He returned home at 1:20 p.m. because he was feeling unwell and wanted to rest. However, his illness and fatigue vanished when he discovered Brianna lifeless. After that, everything seemed like a blur. He explained that he was so stunned that he couldn't think straight on how to react properly. His mind shut down and his hands trembled, leaving him to run to a neighbor and ask for help. The Ramirez brothers' statements were credible and their distress appeared genuine. However, the police had often encountered convincing performances before, so they needed solid proof of their innocence. It was entirely possible that one of them was the perpetrator and the other was covering for him. Therefore, detectives inquired about their relationships with each other. Sebastian declared his love for Brianna and his anticipation for their upcoming wedding. Hugo was asked if he had any grievances against his brother's girlfriend, or if they had quarreled, to which he responded negatively. He also clarified that despite her attractiveness and charm, he had no intentions toward her because he valued their good relationship and would never interfere with Sebastian's happiness. Brianna was like a sister to him. The interrogations lasted for hours, yet neither brother aroused any suspicion. After taking DNA samples from the young men, they were allowed to return home. To confirm or refute the Ramirez brothers' alibis, detectives interviewed employees of El Tequila Salsa restaurant and reviewed the establishment's surveillance footage. Sebastian and Hugo's accounts were corroborated. The theory of a domestic-related crime was dismissed. Then who was the murderer of this innocent young woman? Could there be a predator in the city? Perhaps he had been watching Brianna earlier and had learned much about her. Maybe on a day when she was alone, he executed his criminal intent. The investigation continued. By this point, the autopsy results had come in, confirming the initial suspicions of the police. The sequence of the crime was reconstructed as follows. Brianna first sustained a blunt force injury to the head, likely with an iron. Then the perpetrator cut her throat, followed by multiple stab wounds to her body. The ferocity and relentlessness of the attack were evidenced by the number of wounds, which were so numerous that even experts couldn't tally them. At least 2 of these injuries were immediately fatal. The young woman fought fiercely for her life, as indicated by the foreign DNA found under her nails. Later developments revealed that earlier statements claiming nothing was missing from the home were incorrect. The victim's phone had disappeared. Sebastian discovered the loss and promptly informed the detectives. This piece of information became a critical lead, as once the police received this new clue, they began searching for the mobile device. Rihanna's cell phone provider reported that her phone was still active and provided its location. It turned out that the phone had been nearby all along, specifically within the premises of the restaurant where Sebastian and Hugo worked. The investigation grew more complex with the brothers' undeniable alibi, and one of them reporting the missing phone against the backdrop of suspicious coincidences. Detectives urgently traveled to the specified location, but upon arrival, they found that the coordinates led to the parking lot of a shopping center housing the restaurant. It appeared the sought-after item was in one of the trash bins. After a brief search, a plastic takeout bag with the logo of El Tequila Salsa was found inside a container. Within the bag were the girl's phone, 2 mismatched gloves, and a pair of women's underwear. One of the gloves was stained with blood. This unexpected discovery shifted the narrative, as theories about a predator and a crime driven by intimate motives began to gain traction. The bag and its contents were sent to the laboratory for further examination, potentially still holding fingerprints or DNA from the perpetrator. When shown a photo of the contents, Sebastian recognized his girlfriend's underwear. The investigation proceeded with numerous interrogations of the restaurant staff. On May 5th, everyone was asked to provide DNA samples and undergo examinations for any scratches or injuries. Additionally, both the external and internal surveillance footage of the building and neighboring establishments was thoroughly reviewed. The police had a considerable task ahead of them to determine who had disposed of the bag. Initially, a kitchen worker attracted attention because he was notably late for work, arriving when Brianna was already lifeless. However, the young man had an alibi. He had been stopped for speeding on his way to the restaurant. Nonetheless, reviewing the surveillance footage proved invaluable to the investigation. Another individual, the 24-year-old kitchen manager Raul Ponce-Rocha, became a person of interest. On the day of the crime, he left the building at 10:18 a.m. wearing a brown hoodie and returned at 10:53 a.m. without it. During questioning, he was asked about his whereabouts and intentions. Raul explained that he had gone to pick up his friend Luciano, a dishwasher at the restaurant. Interestingly, Luciano lived in the same building as Brianna, Sebastian, and Hugo. When asked how long his errand took, he said about 20 minutes, but there was a problem with the timeline. What happened in the remaining 15 minutes? Raul refused to explain. Meanwhile, Luciano confirmed Raul's story, saying they did not stop anywhere on their way to work. However, the 15-minute discrepancy continued to trouble the detectives, and Raul's behavior raised questions. He had cuts on his hands, which he attributed to working with knives. Raul was clearly suspicious, but there wasn't enough evidence for his detention. By May 9th, it was established that on May 2nd, at 1:16 p.m., a single employee exited the back door of El Tequila Salsa, and at the same time, only one person approached the trash bins. Identifying the suspect took little time. When his name was announced, the investigative team was not surprised. It was not Sebastian or Hugo Ramirez, as initially thought, but the suspect Raul Ponce-Rocha. When a search warrant was obtained for his home, curious details about the manager's life emerged. Under the mattress of his bed were found 4 pairs of women's underwear, several adult videos along with a brown hoodie and a glove resembling the one found in the trash bin. On the same day, Raul's DNA samples were sent for comparison with those found on the plastic bag. A strand of female hair found on his clothing was also analyzed. Everything pointed to the victim, Brianna. It was just a matter of matching the test results. Raul was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. When it became known that the alleged perpetrator had been found, Sebastian couldn't believe his ears. He never thought his colleague capable of such cruelty. The main question that troubled him was, why did he do it? They hardly knew Brianna and had only seen her in passing. Raul had always seemed like a kind and cheerful guy, someone who wouldn't hurt a fly. But the answer was found. The trial of Raul Ponce-Rocha took place in 2011. Despite the lengthy investigation, Ponce-Rocha never admitted guilt and consistently denied any involvement in the crime. However, the prosecution presented compelling evidence, The defendant's DNA was found on all key pieces of evidence: the iron, the knives, the plastic bag and its contents, and under Brianna's fingernails. Additionally, a shoe print found on the carpet at the crime scene matched the size and pattern of the suspect's shoes. The investigation painted a clear picture of the events. On May 2, 2009, Raul arrived at work at 9 a.m. En route to the restaurant, he passed the victim's house, a place that had long piqued his interest. Not seeing her car, he assumed she was out and saw it as an opportune moment to enter her apartment and take what he desired. The accused had a peculiar habit of collecting women's underwear, the evidence of which was found under his mattress. After the Rodriguez brothers arrived at work, Raul left the restaurant under the guise of picking up Luciano. Instead of signaling his friend immediately upon arrival, he entered the victim's apartment. He easily unlocked the door and entered. It appears he went into Brianna's room and began rummaging through her belongings. He was likely caught off guard at that moment. Otherwise, he could have excused his unexpected presence by claiming he was looking for one of the brothers and that the door had been open. Realizing the absurdity of the situation and fearing recognition, he struck her with the first object he could find, an iron. He then slashed her throat with a knife, followed by inflicting multiple injuries. The investigation concluded that the process of taking her life seemed to gratify him, as evidenced by the excessive number of wounds inflicted on the poor victim. It also noted that Raul used multiple knives during the attack. Afterwards, the culprit tried to cover his tracks by washing his hands and removing his jacket, as he still had to meet Luciano and drive him to the restaurant. He then resumed work, as if nothing had happened, which was captured on the kitchen's video recordings. When many staff took their lunch breaks, he seized the moment to dispose of the bag containing the evidence in a trash bin. Shortly before the trial, Raul stated that he indeed met with Brianna, but did not end her life. However, he suspected who might have done it and named a former restaurant employee. According to the defendant, he saw this acquaintance at Brianna's house on the day her life was tragically ended, thus confirming that he indeed entered the Ramirez apartment. However, when he left, Sergio stayed with Brianna, apparently having an argument. The defendant's statement raised additional questions and investigations. The information he provided was subject to verification. Moreover, the individual he mentioned was abroad. Nonetheless, authorities managed to contact Sergio. He even appeared at the trial to testify his non-involvement and refute Raul's slander. The young man easily proved that he was not in the country on the day of the crime. Weeks before, he had left to care for his gravely ill father in Mexico. Apparently, the defendant hoped that contact with Sergio would not be established, thereby sowing a seed of doubt among the jurors. However, his plan failed. The defendant merely emphasized that he had no qualms about falsely accusing an innocent person of a heinous crime. It was clear that he felt no remorse for his actions. During the trial, Brianna's relatives, as well as Sebastian and Hugo, were present. The young men struggled to contain their emotions, prompting officers to repeatedly call for calm. Ultimately, Raul Ponce Rocha was found guilty of the crime against Brianna Schneller, as well as burglary. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He is serving his sentence at a correctional institution in Walpun, Wisconsin. Following the verdict, the victim's father stated that his daughter's case had become personal for many involved, as they all have families and children. He shared that he has not parted with a Father's Day card Brianna gave him, cherishing every memory of her. Craig Schneller confessed that Brianna's death broke his heart, and he lost faith. No information about Sebastian Ramirez is available. It is only to be hoped that he has closed this tragic chapter of his life with a sense of completeness and has been able to move forward. One day, his brother Hugo appeared on a television show discussing the ordeal they endured. Raul's actions were fatal for Brianna. He not only ended the life of a beautiful young woman, but also devastated the hearts of her family. Things could have been different if the young man had not chosen to cover his tracks. He might have gotten away with clumsy explanations and apologies to the girl. At most, it would have ended with a confrontation between him and the Rodriguez brothers. It is unlikely the victim would have reported him to the police, and even then, the incident could have been resolved with minimal harm. Heather, just 22 years old, had recently embarked on her college journey, settling into her job, and it felt like life was full of promise. Maples' smile and laughter were contagious, and her constant chatter filled the air. She radiated warmth and energy, uplifting everyone around her. Everything changed on January 7th, 2015, when Heather Maples didn't show up for work. Her lifeless body was discovered in her apartment, partly unclothed. Who had the right to take Heather Maples' life? Detectives faced a challenging investigation because Heather had no enemies, and the motive behind this crime remained unclear. If not for one small detail, Heather Maples' death could have remained unsolved, and the criminal would have gone unpunished.
Alias, det är ett år säger you're what? The only way to bloody figure for good there is you're an airy point. Ain't in your hand or your waiver.
On a typical morning at the real estate agency in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on August 7, 2015, Kelsey Price arrived at work and began her usual tasks. Heather, her friend and colleague, was running late, which wasn't surprising to Kelsey, as Heather was known for her lack of punctuality. Kelsey started calling Heather to wake her up, but received no answer. The previous night, Heather had planned to go to a bar with some friends and had asked Kelsey to come get her if she overslept or didn't answer her calls. Therefore, Kelsey wasn't concerned and went to Heather's apartment to wake her up. The girls' apartments were located in the same complex where they worked. Upon arriving, Kelsey found the front door unlocked. Easily entering inside, she saw her friend lying on the bed, sleeping on her stomach, wearing only a crop top and no underwear. Assuming Heather had a wild night, Kelsey tried to wake her up, but there was no response. She then tapped Heather's foot, attempting to rouse her from her sleep, which no one would ever interrupt again. Maple's foot was so cold that Kelsey literally jumped back in horror at the realization of what had happened. Kelsey Price, in horror, stepped out of the apartment and called 911. Soon, emergency services were on the scene. Detective Tommy Massey was one of the first to arrive at the crime scene, and the forensic team meticulously combed through the apartment. Heather was indeed partially undressed, with signs of blows on her face. The hair of the poor girl was soaked in blood, which was also splattered on the walls. It was clear she had been brutally beaten, tortured, and actually assaulted. Massey and his colleague, Detective Maples, coincidentally sharing Heather's surname, recalled this crime as a horrifying nightmare. That's understandable, as witnessing such a heart-wrenching scene is extremely difficult. Heather Nicole Maples was born on August 23, 1992, in Ocala, Florida. Her mother jokingly called Heather a hurricane baby. This nickname was entirely justified, as many envied the energy and courage that Heather possessed. In 2004, Jennifer Hunter gave birth to her second child. Heather welcomed a brother, Ryan, into her life with great joy. However, Ryan was later diagnosed with significant developmental delays, and the older sister, of her own accord, dedicated all her free time to him. She took care of him, happily spent time with him, taught him to speak, walk, and eat on his own. Heather was in the 7th grade at the time and devoted all the following years until graduation to Ryan, showing immense love and dedication to her brother. At the age of 22, Heather Maples made the bold decision to leave her Texas home and embark on a new chapter in Tennessee, pursuing her dream of becoming a psychologist. The journey began with a call from her former classmate, Chaz, inviting her to join him in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where he studied. According to him, It was the perfect place for Heather, with a small college town where she could get a great opportunity to prepare for college. Heather accepted, and in January 2015, the future student went to Chaz in Murfreesboro. By the way, their relationship soon turned romantic. A completely different life began for the girl. With the support of her best friend Kelsey, Heather found a job in the office of the residential complex where they lived. Maples was balancing work with her college preparations. Her friends and family supported her. Everything seemed to be going well, but soon her relationship with Chaz began to crumble, which led to a breakup, and Chaz moved away. At the beginning of August, she excitedly called her mother to share this wonderful news. She had been accepted to college. Her mother, filled with pride, was thrilled for Heather's achievement. However, a week later, Heather failed to show up for work, sparking concern and uncertainty. The detectives understood that, considering the nature of the crime, it could have been related to Heather's personal life. At that point, most of her friends were considered suspects, and frankly speaking, there were reasons for that. Upon examining the apartment, there were no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Heather likely knew her attacker and possibly let them in herself. After a thorough investigation of the crime scene, several important pieces of evidence were discovered: unknown DNA and a hair that did not belong to the victim. All of this was sent for analysis to identify the suspect. However, the most significant piece of evidence was a clear, bloody fingerprint on the right side of Heather's bed. Detective Massey explained that if someone had deliberately dipped their finger in ink and intentionally left their mark, it wouldn't have been so clear and precise. Of course, this print was sent for analysis as well. Additionally, Heather's mobile phone was found in the apartment, but without the password, accessing its contents was impossible. This is where Kelsey came in handy. She played a crucial role, not only helping with the phone, but also deciding to inform Heather's mother of her death, believing it would be better coming from someone who loved and cared for Heather. Detective Massey hoped to get a lot of information about Heather from her friend Kelsey Price. He wanted to know everything about the victim's personal life, especially her relationship with Chaz. Kelsey told the detective that the relationship was quite tense, as Chaz had obvious anger management issues, and sometimes he was too aggressive and cruel towards Heather, so the girl decided to end the relationship herself. Therefore, the police immediately decided to investigate Chaz, but an unexpected turn of events occurred. A young man named Michael was determined to access the crime scene despite the caution tape. He had keys to Heather's apartment.
I didn't know Heather. This is doing me rude, but I gotta ask you because sometimes people so out here, the person I learned that he had sexual romantic knowledge together, and then they contact them more. Thank you.
According to Michael, on the evening before her death, Heather called him and invited him for dinner, which he accepted. Immediately after dinner, Michael went home, unlike Heather, who went to a local bar with friends. But later, Heather reached out to Michael for help.
She called me at 11:40, and so the force has to tell them. Because it tells me that I didn't come to the war. She really needs there right now. There's people that ain't on there, and she's really upset. So you're Callie.
As Michael recounted, Heather was in trouble. A young man named Ortavio was bothering her and was quite aggressive. Immediately after the incident, Michael offered to drive Heather home.
She orders. Is there granny acts, threats? Sausage. Hurry. And we have it. She was done. I drove her to her at Paris. Yeshua. Stairs. I not took she was at.
As per his statement, it was around 2:30 in the morning on August 7th, the last time he saw Heather. Additionally, during the interrogation, Michael mentioned that Heather's front door should have been unlocked because he had her keys since she was dressed in a dress and didn't have pockets to carry them, and he simply forgot to return them after unlocking the door. Michael was very disappointed and did not seem like a liar at all, but investigators had to take his fingerprints and a DNA sample. They also contacted the bar to obtain surveillance footage, which confirmed everything Michael had said during the interrogation. Analysis confirmed that the fingerprints and DNA found at the crime scene did not match his. After Michael was cleared as a suspect, investigators turned their attention to the man who had been with Heather that night, Ortavio. With Kelsey's help in unlocking Heather's mobile phone, interest in Ortavio significantly increased. Detectives discovered that Heather had messaged Ortavio, a friend of hers, inviting him to her apartment just hours before she was found dead.
What are you doing? I don't know. A whole wire down here is sensitive knives, honey, and hearing up you wasn't so you or what is it me up? I think she finished out when it gets cleansed and like.
But why did Heather call Ortavio to her home after Michael had saved her from him? The answer was simple. They were friends, and became more persistent than usual at the bar. Heather was caught off guard. She wasn't prepared for this. Now the detectives needed to speak with Ortavio to get his side of the story.
What did you do to get her there for that? Oh, we're chasing you. We went into the wall. Okay, and it was Heather, a friend of mine. I'll show you a picture, okay? You have any idea what that would have been taken, but I was a little good at what it was. It hadn't just. Yeah, and house there, see it anyway. It was so sad.
The detectives immediately realized that Ortavio was unaware of Heather's death, but what if he was somehow involved in this case? Meanwhile, the interrogation continued.
Heather says you can't fight over to Chicago, and we met about to meet her. And so that was it.
Afterward, Massey eventually asked about the late-night message from Heather.
She takes another text, 30 or something. He said it left. Oh, well, all Larry's. He was off this one.
The detectives intensified their questioning of Ortavio, using a tough interrogation method that not every suspect could withstand.
He was sorry while you are an all records since you are him. You were wavered yesterday. Your kids are with him all day. Is yours not only a take, just full take. Outlays you takes you the back over there. He went over there, and then something happened. And not only was this girl raped, she's dead. For once. No way. His way, one day, here's what I'm going to tell you. There's DNA all over there. It's going to go back, I believe, to one district. Hey. Oh, no, that's.
Ortavio was shocked by what he heard. It seemed he genuinely didn't know what had happened to Heather. Following the interrogation, he willingly agreed to a DNA test, confident that it would clear his name. The results proved him right, as the DNA found at the crime scene did not match his, leading to his exclusion as a suspect. Without any leads, the detectives worked practically around the clock, reviewing surveillance footage, scrutinizing every detail provided by witnesses. On the 9th day of the investigation, as Detective Massey was preparing to leave the office late at night, he received a crucial call from one of the directors of the forensic laboratory. Massey finally got the answer regarding the bloody fingerprint that was lifted from Heather's bed. It belonged to a young man named Brandon Bowling, whose fingerprints were on file due to his employment at a company where he previously worked.
You know him. He named as Chase. You don't remember,
This development prompted Detective Massey to approach the interrogation very gently, wanting to give Brandon a chance to explain what happened that night.
Serlina or Hobbit? Harmony heard? Is out here though, that to let you know, wasn't there an altar? You never seditially keep mutted law, sir. Though yes, his head ribbered, Lewis eventually into a lot hurt. And he was alive. Stop, sir. Son Talon, you were devil. Here we do. Was the last time you were at my farm? Tell me, is you lying?
The detectives knew he was lying because the fingerprint was fresh.
You know you were there. No, I haven't. So Ned, you need to tell me. So that I can understand I go, no, I'll fair. I don't know there, isn't it? Okay, I'm had it through as you pay your print. Kill the bed. I'm such the deal. So it's stay something housed. I'll hang for a card.
It seemed that Brandon understood he was caught, but he continued to deny any involvement in Heather's death.
That he made your man is this support made him put you to death. Do you understand? And this here, this is the support conversation in your loss. The only way your bloody favorite out there is you're an animal. Ain't that your handler? Your waiver. So, I don't know what out of me.
After questioning, detectives requested a DNA test from Brandon, suggesting that if he was innocent, the test would prove it. Brandon did as he was asked, perhaps hoping to be released from police custody, but that did not happen. The investigators decided not to wait for the test results. The match of the fingerprint provided substantial grounds for the next step. The police immediately sent a request to the court for permission to access Brandon's phone, which could help the investigation confirm his movements, track calls, and texts on the night of the crime. However, they were unprepared for what they found on his phone after the court approval. The video from Brandon Bowling's phone was one of the most shocking, even to the most experienced detectives. In this video, the room of the core Heather was captured. Brandon recorded everything, from intimate acts to beatings. Heather was still alive at the time of the recording. In February 2018, Brandon Richmond Bowling pleaded guilty to the attack on Heather Maples. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole. On the day of the verdict, Heather's mother, Jennifer, made a speech that surprised many.
I only ran along the job, my daughter. That ain't where I land. Don't worry about anything, worry about everything.
When the trial ended, in the corridor, Jennifer approached Bowling's mother. Jennifer simply hugged this woman, saying that they both lost their children that day. Unfortunately, Brandon Bowling never explained his motives. What are your thoughts on this? What do you think Brandon's motive was, if there was one?